The hum of the command center filled the air, a steady rhythm that betrayed the urgency of the situation. General Elena Cartwright stood before a holographic display, her sharp gaze fixed on the encrypted message that had been received by Earth's communications network. The data, barely decipherable, had traveled through uncharted regions of the galaxy. The words it held were cryptic, but the coordinates were clear: a distant star system, deep in the unexplored territories. It was a place where humanity had never ventured before, and yet the message hinted at something more: a relic, a forgotten artifact that could reunite the galaxy. But Elena knew the risks. The galaxy was no longer a peaceful place. The once great empire that bound thousands of species together had collapsed centuries ago. What remained were isolated factions, each harboring ancient grudges, distrust, and competing interests. Humanity had remained mostly neutral in galactic affairs, content to focus on its recovery after the great wars that ravaged their homeworld. But that neutrality was beginning to wear thin. With the galaxy in chaos, Earth now stood on the precipice of something much larger, a role they hadn't chosen, but one they might have to embrace. She turned to her crew, each of them assembled in the briefing room. The council members, military strategists, and political officers all watched her, waiting for her decision. "General, what do we do now?" asked Commander Lucian Hayes, one of her closest allies and a former war hero. His voice, usually calm and measured, now held an edge of uncertainty. This relic, if it's truly real, it could change the course of the galaxy. But you saw the message. It was a warning, too. There's danger here. Elena nodded, her mind racing. The coordinates pointed to a star system at the fringes of known space, far beyond the reach of established galactic powers. It was territory that no one had dared to explore in centuries. There were whispers of ancient technology buried there, remnants of a civilization long thought lost. If they were lucky, the relic could be the key to ending the war between the factions, bringing peace where there was only bloodshed. But luck had never been on their side before. "We need to act," Elena said, her voice firm. "The galaxy is fractured. Peace is a distant dream, and every day we wait, more lives are lost. If this relic has even a fraction of the power the message claims, it could be the key to ending the madness. Or it could be the weapon that destroys us all," said Dr. Alyssa Varon, the team's lead scientist. Her voice was laced with caution, a reminder that hope often came at a price. If this artifact is connected to the fall of the Empire, then its power might be too dangerous for anyone to control. Elena turned her attention to the map of the galaxy that flickered before her. It was a vast, fragmented expanse, dotted with countless systems at war. From the remnants of the Tyrak Dominion to the fractured Kaleth Coalition, each faction would see the relic as either a tool for peace or a weapon to further their own dominance. "That's why we'll need allies," Elena replied, her eyes steely. "And we'll need to find them fast. The Syndicate will be after this too. We won't be the only ones looking for it." Suddenly, the room's doors slid open, and a young officer, pale-faced and out of breath, rushed in. "General, you need to see this," he said, holding a data pad. "It's from the communications network." Elena took the pad and scanned it quickly. Her heart sank. The signal had been intercepted, and this time, it wasn't just the Syndicate hunting them. It was something far worse. A new player, one she'd hoped to never face. "The Silent Syndicate," she whispered under her breath. The message was clear. The galaxy's power brokers had already caught wind of the relic's location. The race for control of the galaxy was about to become a deadly contest. Engagement point. Just as Elena begins to gather her team for their first mission, an explosion rocks the station. A rival faction has already made its move, and the crew is forced into an immediate battle for survival, pushing them into the heart of the conflict they were only beginning to understand. The explosion shook the command station with the force of a thunderclap, sending alarms blaring across the facility. Alina's heart raced as she rushed toward the nearest exit, her instincts taking over as the chaos erupted around her. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls as the station descended into disarray. Crew members scrambled to their posts, while others dove for cover, trying to make sense of the attack. "Report," Alina barked, her voice cutting through the confusion. "General, it's a full assault. The Syndicate's forces are already here. We're under attack," shouted Lieutenant Nader, her operations officer, from a nearby console. She was frantically tapping away at the controls, trying to reroute power to the station's defenses. But Alina's focus was elsewhere. She scanned the room, her eyes locking onto the one person she hadn't seen since the explosion began, Captain Lucas Drake, her second in command. He was supposed to be coordinating the evacuation, but he was nowhere to be found. "Where's Captain Drake?" Alina asked sharply. Nader hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. He was in the lower sector when the blast went off, General. I haven't been able to reach him." A sinking feeling twisted in Alina's gut. Drake had always been reliable, dependable, but something felt off. She had trusted him implicitly, but now that trust was being tested in the worst possible way. "Get me eyes on him," she ordered, her voice cold and controlled, despite the rising tension. "We don't leave anyone behind." As Nader began coordinating with the security teams, Alina made her way to the command center's tactical bay. The room was a mess of flickering screens and frantic voices as the Syndicate's forces breached the outer perimeter. But that wasn't what had Alina's attention. Her eyes fixed on a strange symbol displayed on one of the consoles, a series of intricate markings that seemed to pulse with an ominous glow. "What is that?" Alina asked, stepping closer to the console. "That's..." Nader trailed off, studying the symbol. "That's not Syndicate. It's something else. Someone's hacked into our systems." The realization hit Alina like a cold slap. The Syndicate wasn't the only threat. Someone had infiltrated the crew, and they were trying to keep her from discovering the truth about the relic. Before she could react, her comms unit crackled to life. It was Drake's voice, but there was something strange in his tone. "General, we need to talk. You should come to the lower sector immediately. I've found something." "Stay put, Captain," Alina snapped, her mind racing. "We need to stick together. Get to the evacuation points now." There was a long pause, the silence thick with tension. Then a voice came through, not from Drake, but from another source altogether. "It's too late for that, General." The voice was unmistakable, sending a jolt of recognition through Alina. It was Drake, but it wasn't Drake. The voice had changed, deeper, more sinister, as if manipulated. Her blood ran cold as the message continued, each word cutting through her like a blade. "Your mission was never about peace, Alina. You've been playing right into their hands. The relic is not just a tool of power, it's a weapon, and you're going to help me use it." The transmission cut off abruptly, and Alina stood frozen for a moment, her mind reeling. Her second in command, the man she had trusted above all others, had betrayed her. The implications of the message were clear. Someone had orchestrated this entire mission from the shadows, and they were willing to sacrifice everything, including Drake, to get what they wanted. "General," Nader's voice snapped her back to the present. "The Syndicate is closing in. We need to move now." Alina's gaze hardened, her mind already formulating a plan. She couldn't afford to be distracted by the betrayal. She needed to think of the bigger picture. The relic was still out there, and now, more than ever, she couldn't let the galaxy fall into the wrong hands. But first, she had to deal with the treachery within her own ranks. "Prepare the team for extraction," Alina ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're leaving, and we're going to make sure Drake doesn't get what he wants." Engagement point. As the crew makes their way to the evacuation zones, Alina is forced to confront not just the immediate danger of the Syndicate, but the haunting reality that someone from within her ranks has sabotaged their mission. The betrayal cuts deeper as Elena realizes that the person who knew her best, the one she trusted most, has now become her enemy. The crew scrambled through the wreckage of the station, debris floating weightlessly in the zero-gravity environment. Alarms blared, their harsh beeps cutting through the chaos, but Elena's mind was already moving 100 steps ahead. The explosion had been a diversion, a calculated strike to delay their progress, and it worked. The Syndicate was relentless, and their power knew no bounds. They had anticipated this move. Status report. Elena barked over her comms, her voice steady despite the panic around her. Commander Hayes, now stationed at the controls, flicked switches to stabilize the ship's systems. We've got 2 broken thrusters, and the communications array is down. We can't contact Earth or our allies. His voice was tense but controlled. But we're still flying, General. Elena nodded, her mind racing. There was no time to waste. The Syndicate had sent a clear message. They were prepared to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. The team's next move would be critical. But the wreckage wasn't just a setback, it was a clue. The explosion, the chaos, it all felt like something more. The Syndicate was desperate to slow them down, and there had to be a reason why. "All right," she said, taking a breath. "We need to get to the coordinates the message pointed to. The Valorians are our only lead. They know something about the relic, something we don't." "We're not just up against the Syndicate, though," Dr. Alyssa Varon chimed in from her station, her fingers flying over the holographic interface as she sifted through encrypted files. "There's something else going on. The data we recovered from the explosion, it's pointing to a signal anomaly in the same sector where the Valorians are rumored to be hiding. It's almost like someone's been trying to keep this information from us." Elena's gut tightened. The Valorians had always been a mysterious species, rumored to be both wise and reclusive. But the fact that there were signs of interference in their communications was unsettling. The Syndicate wasn't the only faction willing to protect secrets. The crew quickly made their way to the rendezvous point, a hidden asteroid base on the outskirts of the galaxy, a known safe house for those in the black market. If anyone could point them in the right direction to find the Valorians, it would be here. The base was a maze of steel and shadows, a place where anything could be bought for the right price: secrets, weapons, alliances. As they docked, Elena's instincts kicked into overdrive. Something felt wrong. The atmosphere in the docking bay was too quiet, too clean. They were greeted by a lone figure, an old ally, a contact from their past. He looked like he had seen better days. His clothes were ragged, and there was a look in his eyes that spoke of too many secrets buried too deep. "General Cartwright," the man said, his voice low and raspy. "You should have stayed away. There's no time. They're coming for you. And they'll take the relic, no matter the cost." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "Who is they?" she demanded, stepping closer. "And why should we trust you now?" The man shook his head, his eyes darting nervously. "You don't understand. The relic isn't just an artifact, it's a key. The kind of key that can open doors no one wants opened. And you're not the only one searching for it. The Syndicate, the Collective, the Caliph, they've all been after it for centuries. But none of them know what it really is. Only the Valorians do, and they've been hiding it from everyone." Elena's pulse quickened. "So why help us now?" "Because," the man said, leaning in close, his voice barely a whisper, "they already know you're coming, and they won't let you leave with it." Just as the last word left his lips, the base's security alarms blared, a red warning light flashing. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Elena's crew instantly moved into defensive positions. The man's eyes widened in fear. "They found us," he muttered. "Too late. You're trapped." Engagement point. The crew is ambushed by a well-coordinated strike force. Elena must fight off attackers in the dark corners of the base, all while trying to protect the key information the man revealed about the relic. As they flee, Alina is left with a burning question. What is the true power of the relic, and who else is willing to kill for it? The blaring alarms grew louder, and the flickering red lights cast long, distorted shadows across the corridor. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she motioned for her crew to move out, but the narrow base hallways were a labyrinth, twisting and turning like a rat's nest. They had only seconds before the Syndicate forces overwhelmed them. Move, Alina commanded, her voice sharp and commanding. Her tactical instincts kicked in, and she led the way, ducking into an adjacent room. It was dimly lit, filled with crates and old equipment, perfect for an ambush. The door slammed shut behind them with a clang, and they heard the echo of footsteps growing closer. The rest of the crew took defensive positions, their weapons ready. Commander Hayes stood by the door, his rifle aimed at the narrow hallway. Dr. Varen worked quickly at the terminal, trying to reroute the security systems to their advantage. Every second counted. They're using thermal scans, Hayes said, his voice tight with urgency. They know we're here. Alina's mind raced. We need to get to the main hangar, she said. If we can reach the ship, we can make a run for it. Dr. Varen, any luck with that terminal? The scientist nodded, her fingers flying over the controls, her eyes darting back and forth. It's encrypted, but I'm making progress. Just a little more time. But the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. The Syndicate strike team wasn't far behind, and their heavy boots signaled they were getting closer by the second. Alina turned to her crew. Get ready, she said grimly. If we're going to make it out of here, we need to fight our way to the hangar. Stay close, keep your heads down, and trust each other. The tension in the room was palpable. Every one of them knew the stakes. The relic's location was now out in the open, and every faction in the galaxy would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. Earth had a chance to alter the course of history, but first, they had to survive this fight. The door to the terminal Binge opened. Syndicate agents flooded into the room, blasters raised. Alina didn't hesitate. She fired first, the crack of her weapon cutting through the air as she took down one of the operatives. Chaos erupted. Blaster fire filled the room, ricocheting off walls and crates, and the crew fought with fierce determination. Hayes moved with precision, his rifle blasting through the advancing enemies as he covered Alina's back. Varen, though not a fighter, used her expertise to hack into the security systems, locking doors behind them to slow the Syndicate's progress. Hangar's clear, Varen said, voice tight with concentration. But we've got more coming in from the east. We need to move now. Alina nodded sharply. Move out, Hayes, take point. Varen, stay close and cover our six. The crew charged through the facility, pushing through narrow hallways and loading docks until they reached the hangar. The sight of their ship, the Stellar Fury, standing by for departure filled Alina with a momentary surge of hope. But before they could make it to the ship, an explosion rocked the hangar, sending debris scattering across the floor. Alina's heart skipped a beat as a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was an old friend, or rather, an old enemy. General Cartwright, the man said, his voice dark and taunting. His eyes gleamed under the harsh lights of the hangar. I see you finally made it this far, but I'm afraid this is where your journey ends. The figure stepped forward, revealing himself as Marcus Delarue, a former military ally turned rogue mercenary, now in the service of the Syndicate. His grin was twisted, and his hands rested casually on the two blasters holstered at his sides. Delarue, Alina hissed, her grip tightening around her weapon. I should have known you'd be involved. I'm just following orders, General, Delarue said with a sneer. But I will admit, it's a pleasure to finally take you down. You and your little band of misfits have caused the Syndicate too many headaches. The tension in the room was unbearable. Alina's crew was pinned down, and the hangar's exit was blocked. Delarue was as deadly as he was cunning, and this confrontation wasn't going to be easy. You're not going anywhere, Delarue said, his voice cold. The relic stays where it belongs, in the hands of those who know how to use it. A blast of energy hit the ground beside Alina, knocking her off balance. She managed to steady herself, eyes narrowing in determination. "We'll see about that," Alina muttered under her breath. Engagement point. The crew is caught in a deadly standoff with Delarue. Alina must outmaneuver him in a high-stakes battle, where the fate of the relic and her crew hangs in the balance. The tension builds as Alina's determination and leadership are tested like never before. The crackling energy blasts from Delarue's twin blasters sent sparks flying and the air hummed with tension. Alina's crew took cover behind crates and machinery, trying to outmaneuver the rogue mercenary. Delarue's voice echoed through the hangar, taunting them, his confidence in his superior position palpable. "You know, Alina," Delarue called, his grin wide, "I always admired you. You were a hell of a soldier. But you should have known better than to keep poking around in places that don't concern you. The relic, it's beyond your understanding." Alina's pulse raced as she crouched behind a large cargo crate, strategizing her next move. She had to act quickly. Delarue and his team were too well organized. Their tactical advantage, coupled with the Syndicate's resources, was a dangerous combination, but she had one weapon they didn't, her crew. "Commander, take the left flank," she whispered into her communicator, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Varen, stick with me and cover the right. I'll create a distraction." She could hear the shuffle of her crew moving into position, each member silently acknowledging their orders. Alina peeked from behind cover, spotting Delarue standing in the open, barking commands to his men. He was too confident, too focused on the prize. "That's the opening I need." "Alina," Hayes muttered through the comms, "we've got reinforcements incoming. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they breach the door." She didn't flinch. 5 minutes was all she needed. "On my mark," she said, the plan forming in her mind like a well-crafted weapon. The crew positioned themselves strategically. Alyssa, the scientist, was out of her depth, but she'd adapted quickly. The data terminals in the hangar had given her a way to access the base's internal systems, and she was ready to turn the tide. Alina exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Now. She leaped out from behind cover, charging at Delarue with blinding speed, forcing him to turn toward her. As expected, his blasters erupted in a series of blasts, each one missing her by inches as she weaved through the chaos of the hangar. Delarue's mercenaries fired at her crew, but the momentary distraction was enough for Hayes and Varen to take them down with surgical precision. The mercenaries faltered, unsure of how to respond to the sudden onslaught. Alina ducked low, dodging another blast from Delarue, before firing back with a precision shot that hit his blaster arm, sending it skittering across the floor. He cursed and dropped to one knee, but he wasn't finished. "You think you've won," he sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "The Syndicate isn't just some rogue gang. They've been preparing for this moment for centuries. If you think this artifact is your ticket to winning, you're mistaken. Humanity can't save the galaxy. You've only set yourselves up to fall." Alina took a step forward, her eyes cold and resolute. "We're not trying to save the galaxy, Delarue. We're trying to end the war. But if we have to tear the galaxy apart to do that, so be it." At that moment, the ground shook violently. The hangar doors exploded inward with a deafening crash as reinforcements flooded in, an elite Syndicate assault team. They had arrived faster than anyone expected. Alina's crew was outnumbered and outgunned. The ship was their only hope now. "Hayes," Alina shouted, "we have to make a run for it. We're not leaving empty-handed." But before they could make their escape, a high-pitched scream echoed through the hangar, freezing them all in place. It was Alyssa. She was at the terminal, but her face had gone pale, her hands shaking as she tried to hack into the base's security system. "Alyssa?" Alina called, rushing toward her, but the scientist was frozen, her eyes wide with shock. "What's wrong?" I've been locked out," Someone has control of the systems. They've already overridden the countdown. Alyssa gasped, her voice trembling. We're too late. They're activating the base's self-destruct sequence. Alina's heart dropped. The Syndicate had anticipated their every move, and now, it seemed, they were walking straight into a trap. Self-destruct in T-5 minutes. A cold, automated voice echoed through the hangar, confirming Alyssa's words. Damn it, Alina muttered under her breath, the gravity of their situation crashing down on her. Get to the ship now, she ordered. We're out of time. Engagement point. As the countdown begins, the crew is faced with the impossible choice of escaping the base before it's destroyed or risking everything to disable the self-destruct and keep their mission alive. With Delarue's forces closing in, Alina must navigate this perilous situation with a risky, high-stakes plan to keep the relic and her crew alive. The countdown echoed through the hangar like a ticking clock, the seconds slipping away as Alina's heart pounded. 5 minutes. It wasn't enough time to escape or disable the self-destruct sequence. The Syndicate had them cornered, their reinforcements flooding in from every direction. It was a race against time, and every decision now was a gamble. Commander, Alina barked, her voice sharp with urgency. Take Varen and cover the escape route. I'll try to stop the self-destruct. No, Hayes replied, his voice firm. You're not going alone. We stick together. Alyssa stood at the terminal, hands trembling as she fought to break through the encryption. I'm trying, Alina. But the override code, it's locked. The only way to stop it is to cut the power to the whole station. But it's going to require manual intervention, and I'm not sure where the main circuit is located. I know where it is, Alina said, her voice resolute. She'd been in this kind of situation before, under pressure, with everything on the line. There's a maintenance hatch near the core. If I can get there and shut it down manually, we can stop the explosion. But I need cover. Not happening, Hayes said, his tone unyielding. We're not letting you go out there alone. The hangar door slammed open with a violent crash, and a dozen Syndicate soldiers poured into the room, weapons raised. The air was thick with the sound of blaster fire, and Alina's crew moved instinctively, falling into formation. We'll cover you, General, Hayes said, taking position behind a stack of crates and opening fire on the incoming soldiers. You have 5 minutes. Make them count. With the countdown continuing to tick down, Alina didn't waste a second. She motioned for Alyssa to stay behind the terminal, her fingers already working the keypad to initiate a backup override. The scientist gave a quick nod, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Alina sprinted across the hangar, darting from cover to cover, her mind focused solely on the task ahead. The maintenance hatch was located deep within the station's core, far from the hangar where the battle raged. But the journey was treacherous, and every step felt like it could be her last. As Alina made her way through the station's labyrinthine corridors, the echo of blaster fire grew fainter. Her thoughts raced with the knowledge that this was a one-way mission. If she couldn't stop the self-destruct in time, the entire base would be obliterated, and with it, any chance they had of keeping the Syndicate from taking the relic. She reached the maintenance hatch and pried it open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. The air was thick with the smell of coolant and burning metal, and Alina moved quickly, her every step measured as she followed the winding path that led to the heart of the station's power core. The tunnel grew colder, the hum of the station's engines vibrating through the walls. Alina's breath was shallow as she pushed forward, the weight of the mission pressing on her shoulders. Time was running out. As she reached the access panel to the power core, her heart skipped a beat. A series of red lights blinked ominously, signaling that the core was in active shutdown mode. If she didn't sever the power within the next 2 minutes, the base would go up in flames. Alina, Alyssa's voice crackled over the comms. I've unlocked the secondary access, but you need to hurry. The detonation timer is counting down too fast. Alina's fingers flew across the panel, disengaging the security locks and pulling the power lines free. The cold metal of the wires burned against her skin, but she pushed through the pain, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. She heard the muffled sound of blaster fire in the distance, the crew's desperate fight to hold their ground against the Syndicate soldiers. Her team was buying her the time she needed, but she wasn't sure they'd survive much longer. With a final wrench of the power conduit, the lights flickered and the self-destruct countdown halted. Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The base was safe, at least for now. But the battle was far from over. Alina, Alyssa's voice came through again, quieter this time. The Syndicate is still closing in. They know we've stopped the self-destruct. They'll be coming for you next. I know, Alina replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure. We're not out of this yet. I'm heading back now. As she made her way back toward the hangar, Alina's thoughts raced. They had managed to delay the explosion, but the Syndicate would not stop hunting them. And the relic, it was still out there, its power greater than anyone had imagined. She arrived back at the hangar to find chaos. Hayes and the others were holding their ground, but the Syndicate was relentless. Every inch of the hangar was being fought over. Alina, Hayes shouted over the firefight. Get to the ship now. Engagement point. As the crew makes their final push to escape, Alina must lead her team through a deadly firefight, trying to reach the stellar fury before the Syndicate closes in. With the self-destruct prevented, the relic still at the center of the conflict, the team's survival hangs in the balance. The hangar was a war zone. The hum of blasters and the clatter of footsteps filled the air as Alina and her crew fought tooth and nail to survive. Behind her, the stellar fury was still standing, its engines roaring with power as the crew made their final push to reach the ship. But with every second, the Syndicate forces were closing in. They were outnumbered, and every moment they spent in the hangar made escape more impossible. Alina, take point, Hayes yelled, his voice strained. We're not going to make it if we don't move faster. Alina's eyes were locked on the ship ahead. They could see the escape ramps extended, the crew's last chance of getting off the station before the Syndicate tightened their grip. The self-destruct had been stopped, but it hadn't made them any safer. It had only bought them time. Time that was quickly running out. She nodded at Hayes, signaling him to follow. With Varen and Alyssa close behind, they sprinted toward the ship, weaving between crates and blasted debris. Blaster fire zinged past them, and Alina's sharp instincts kicked in, ducking and diving to avoid the deadly shots. The crew was moving in perfect synchrony, each step taken with precision as they fought their way to the stellar fury. A loud explosion echoed through the hangar, sending shockwaves that rattled their bones. Alina barely managed to keep her footing as a wave of heat blasted past her, followed by a cloud of smoke and debris. The hangar's walls groaned in protest, buckling under the force of the blast. Alina, Alyssa screamed, we need to move faster. We're almost there, Alina replied, pushing herself to run harder, her breath shallow but determined. The ship was now within reach, only a few more steps. But as they neared the ship's ramp, a voice boomed across the hangar, freezing them in their tracks. Stop right there. Delarue's voice was unmistakable, laced with bitter satisfaction. Alina's stomach tightened. He had found them, and he wasn't going to let them escape without a fight. From the shadows, Delarue stepped forward, flanked by several Syndicate soldiers, all with weapons trained on the crew. He was unarmed now, but his cold, calculating eyes never left Alina. I must admit, Delarue said, his voice dripping with contempt, I underestimated you, General. You've caused a lot of problems for us, but it ends here. Alina's fingers twitched around the grip of her weapon. She couldn't let them take her crew. They had fought too hard to get this far. There was no going back. Get off our ship, Delarue, she said, her voice low but full of authority. I don't think that's an option, Delarue replied, his eyes glinting with malice. The Syndicate has no intention of letting you leave. The relic must be secured, and if you're not willing to give it to us, we'll take it by force." The rest of the crew stood ready, blasters in hand, prepared for the inevitable battle. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ensuring the Syndicate didn't gain control of the relic. Delarue smirked, stepping aside to reveal a small group of elite soldiers moving into position behind him. The Syndicate had come prepared for a final confrontation, and they had the manpower to ensure victory. But Elena wasn't backing down. "You're too late," she said. "You're outnumbered, and you're on the wrong side of history." With a sharp command, Hayes opened fire, the sound of his rifle cutting through the tense silence. The Syndicate soldiers scattered, but it was too late. A battle broke out in the hangar, and Elena's crew gave as good as they got. Blaster fire filled the air, ricocheting off the walls, while the crew expertly moved and fired, taking down Syndicate soldiers one by one. But Delarue was still standing, watching, waiting for his moment to strike. Elena didn't give him the chance. "Hayes, cover me," she shouted, ducking behind a crate and sprinting forward. She moved like a shadow, darting between cover, using the chaos to her advantage. The Stellar Fury was just a few meters away now, and the escape was so close. Delarue's voice echoed across the hangar, cold and mocking. "You think you can escape with the relic, General? The Syndicate has already marked its place in the galaxy. You won't be able to outrun us forever." Elena's jaw tightened. She had no intention of outrunning them. She intended to end this now. Reaching the entrance of the Stellar Fury, she quickly climbed the ramp and turned to face the crew. "We're going," she shouted. "Get in now." Alyssa, Varen, and Hayes all sprinted for the ramp, their guns raised, covering each other as they made the final dash to the ship. The Stellar Fury's engines roared to life, and the massive doors began to close just as the last of the crew made it aboard. But before it could fully shut, Delarue lunged forward, trying to grab onto the ramp. "Stop!" he yelled, his voice full of fury. "You can't leave, not after everything." With one last burst of energy, Elena fired a single shot, hitting the control panel near the ramp. The doors slammed shut, cutting off Delarue's pursuit. The ship shot into the sky, engines firing as they made their escape. Engagement point. The crew has successfully evaded capture and is on their way off the Syndicate-controlled station, but the battle is far from over. The relic remains in their possession, but it's clear the Syndicate will stop at nothing to claim it. What awaits them next? The Stellar Fury surged into hyperspace, leaving the crumbling station and its deadly grip far behind. Elena stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the stars stretching out before her. The ship's interior hummed with the tension of the battle they had just narrowly survived. The crew was alive, but that victory had come at a steep price, one they had yet to fully understand. "Elena, we're clear of the station," Hayes said, his voice coming through the comms. He sounded relieved, but the weight of what had transpired hung heavy in the air. "We've made it out, for now." "For now," Elena repeated, her voice hard. "The Syndicate won't stop. They'll be hunting us, and that artifact, it's still the key to everything." Alyssa, who had been working frantically at one of the consoles, turned to face her. "You're right. I've analyzed the data from the terminal we retrieved. The relic is ancient, and it's not just a weapon, it's something far more dangerous. Something the Syndicate wants because it can alter the balance of power in the galaxy. If we're going to stop them, we need to understand it fully." Elena didn't need any further explanation. The relic had been their mission, but now it was a ticking time bomb. She had seen enough destruction to know that the Syndicate's desire to control the galaxy's power meant they'd burn everything to the ground to get what they wanted. "We can't keep running forever," Elena said, turning to face the rest of the crew. "We need a plan, and we need to figure out what the Syndicate's next move is. We can't afford to underestimate them any longer. Varen, the former soldier, leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. His face was hard, his expression stoic as always, but there was a fire in his eyes now. I've fought against them before. The syndicate's never been this organized. They've been consolidating power for years, maybe decades. We're not just dealing with rogue mercenaries anymore. This is an empire in the making. We need allies, Elena said, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. If we're going to stop them, we can't do it alone. We need to find other factions, other groups willing to fight. If the Syndicate controls the relic, they'll turn the galaxy into their playground. Alyssa nodded. We're going to need intel. I've been studying the artifact's data, but we need more. There's a hidden archive on the planet Thraxis. It's said to hold ancient knowledge about the relic and its origins, but getting there won't be easy. It's deep in Syndicate territory. That's where we're heading then, Elena said, her voice calm but filled with the steel of a commander who had faced worse odds. We don't have the luxury of waiting. The ship's navigation systems pinged, confirming the course for Thraxis. It was a dangerous mission, one that would take them deep into Syndicate-controlled space, but it was their only option. The Stellar Fury was built for speed and stealth, and Elena trusted her crew to execute the mission flawlessly. Get ready for a rough ride, she warned. This mission isn't just about surviving. It's about stopping a force that could destroy everything we fought for. The galaxy needs us, and we won't fail. As the crew prepared for the journey, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into the heart of darkness. But there was no turning back now. The stakes had never been higher. The Stellar Fury shot forward through hyperspace, its engines humming with determination. The relic was more than just an object of power. It was a symbol of humanity's will to endure, to fight back against overwhelming odds. And they would fight, together. As they made their way toward Thraxis, Elena knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's resolve. The Syndicate had made a grave mistake in underestimating them. And now they would learn the hard way that humanity would never back down. Final engagement point. The crew prepares to infiltrate the Syndicate's stronghold on Thraxis, where the secrets of the relic will be revealed, and the final battle for the galaxy's future will unfold. The clock is ticking, and Aleva's crew must face their biggest challenge yet, defeating an empire that will stop at nothing to control the galaxy.